And hello, everybody. We are going live with the Lessons Learned podcast for today, March the 6th, which I never actually say that, but just felt like filling the time. So, hi, everybody. We're gonna be talking today. We're gonna plunge right into controversy town because why the heck not? More of a thing that I've been on milling on my mind for the last week or so, for a time really, but decided, well, we can always tackle this. Let me see. Okay, checking that I haven't muted myself. Um, but before that, of course, we're gonna tackle some of the news. Oh, by the way, the controversial subject. I think if you're looking at the title, you're like, what the heck is this? Listen, we're not going to complain about SJWs. In a way, we're gonna talk about the people who complain about SJWs. So hold on to your butts, because it's gonna be interesting. Um, and more to the point, why do people think that way? And what does it mean for the industry? Because the industry is going through a lot of turmoil right now, as the news that we're going to talk about show. But I find the reaction to that to be rather curious. Not necessarily new, but still curious.
Yeah.
So let's start with some piece of news from Death Stranding, of all things. Uh, uh, Hideo Kojima, and this is from the IGN Latin site, so it's in Spanish, but I will translate basically. Uh, it basically says that Death Stranding is a bit late, right? It won't come out yet. Um, he suggested at some point that it would come out before 2019, but we're already at 2019, so yes, it's been delayed for a little bit. Considering that nobody knows exactly what Death Stranding is supposed to be, really, I I don't know. I think that I'll be watching from the sidelines when Death Stranding actually arrives, because it's gonna be like a cultural artifact, and I'm like,
Yeah. Um, I don't particularly much care either way for Hideo Kojima. So I once only tried Metal Gear Solid 4 because it came with my first PlayStation 3 as part of a bundle. And I tried it and I'm like it looks pretty and all, but it's like, nah, it doesn't seem all that interesting. And I promptly sold that game to GameStop. But like either way, it's like, oh hey, that exists. It looks interesting, but I'll wait until it comes out and to be hyped for it or whatever, and probably wait until it's on sale before I even consider playing it. That's assuming one of my relatives doesn't just buy it and I just borrow it from them.
yeah. It's just that I have no idea what it's supposed to be. Is it supposed to be an RPG? Is it supposed to be like an art installation?
A stealth game.
Stealth game, an interactive movie thing going on? Because Kojima has a thing for basically trying to make his games like movies. I just don't know, and when I don't know something, I go like, I don't know. You come out and you show yourself and see if you're willing to deal with that, because I'm not gonna. Nope, not a thing I'm gonna do. So yeah, I mean, I think whatever it is, I think it's gonna be some kind of milestone, and I hope that it's a positive milestone. But yeah, who knows?
Yeah, I'm hoping it's good, especially since this is going to be his first game, I guess, off the leash from Konami. So
Konami, yeah.
I'm wishing him the best.
And other talk about corporate news. Vivendi has sold the last of its shares in Ubisoft. We talked about this last year and early this year, how Vivendi was attempting to actually started about the news started trickling down about summer of like 2018, that Vivendi was trying to take over Ubisoft.
Yeah, and they managed to kind of stave off the corporate takeover. I guess it wasn't described as a hostile corporate takeover.
Yeah, hostile takeover. Vivendi once owned a quarter of the publisher's stock, published stock. Uh, it it apparently was able to do so in part because French law uh, allows for, and it had to mount a more aggressive a defense of corporations so that they're not as easily be able to take over.
Hmm.
So that's a thing. Um, but besides that, not much to do. So does that mean that Ubisoft won't be bought out outright or sold to another company or taken over by someone else? Who knows?
Yeah,
But
at least for now, it seems like they're safe.
so there's that. We talked a little bit about this, but it seems that according to, this is rumors, by the way. Now we're into rumoring and rumor mongering here, so be careful. Rumors, according to The Verge, is that Microsoft reportedly launching a diskless Xbox One S next month. So they're currently their most advanced console is gonna go diskless. Um, Xbox One S All Digital Edition, which pre-order is expected to be able in mid-April, so pretty soon, a month and a half from now. It's also available in stores in May ahead of Microsoft's typical E3 show in June. Codenamed Xbox Maverick, details of this console appeared in November. Microsoft also rumored to be creating an option to ship the diskless console with games pre-installed, so new Xbox owners can choose the games they want installed before the console ships. Not bad.
Hmm.
If it's of a lower price point than the disc version, and they
Yeah,
have a good bundle.
and I believe we discussed this. We might have mentioned this before about the diskless version.
Mm-hmm.
If I recall correctly, I don't remember where I heard it from. Is that it's either going to be like $100 cheaper, which I think is a little odd that the disk drive would cost that much. I don't think disk drives cost that much these days, especially like a Blu-ray drive. But I mean, hey, it's $100 off. And especially in like this connected world, and if you live in a place where you have good internet,
Yeah.
there's probably no downsides to it. And again, we discussed this that this is what Microsoft wanted to do when they launched it a couple, 6 years ago, probably now 7 years ago, that they wanted this. They wanted their consoles to be completely diskless. So, but I guess that it wasn't the right time because we don't see like this outcry anymore. At least I think the other thing too is that they're not putting in that DRMs like, oh yeah, your diskless console is going to need to check in every once in a while.
Yeah, well, many of the games or most of the games that you would play on a diskless Xbox will require an online connection anyway. So there's that.
Yeah.
So the DRM by virtue of online connection is kind of like having a disc on the console. You can't play this disc, and with more and more of games just being outside of the disc anyway, because you have to download patches and updates, like a day one patch, which in some cases has been bigger than the actual game. So you kind of buy or go to the store and they just give you a little, disc shaped card that says, here's the code for whatever. Input that code. Yeah. And also, one thing, the article closes with saying this, and I find this very interesting. Microsoft is also readying its xCloud game streaming service. The streaming service will use Xbox One X hardware in servers, stream games to PC, consoles, and mobile devices. We're talking about how Microsoft wants to offer it to the Switch owners or something, I think. So it could be part of a thing. Like, essentially, Microsoft wants to turn the Xbox into its own Steam. It's kind of reversing the way I see it. So it's trying to reverse what Steam was trying to do a couple of years ago with the Steam box. Like, they had the service and they wanted to have a Steam box that said, okay, you buy this and automatically you create a closed ecosystem. They have the boxes, which are a closed ecosystem, and through that box they want to have this service that sort of connects to everything, right? Which follows a long tradition of trying to make video game consoles and never be really sold as video game consoles. They always sold as entertaining devices, right? And now more than ever, we can get Netflix and get all the services through that. So, yeah, I'm gonna click on this link because I want to know more about this xCloud game service. Microsoft Excel service streams Xbox game to PC, consoles, and mobile devices, available for public trials in 2019. So yeah, um, we're compatible with the services, and they want to make sure. So the idea is they want to attract PC players to join in that architecture, and that links to the making games that you can link your accounts from different devices, and also what else? Be able to, you know, co-play with other people. I forgot the term about it. So that seems to be a thing. Um, I think that seems to be the strategy, that they're no longer going to be competing on a machine by machine basis with Sony and Nintendo. They're going to be all about the service.
And of course, this is also going into like, I wonder if we're gonna see a little less of like a hard generation line in
Yeah,
terms of consoles, and maybe it's just gonna be like a little homogenous thing, or it's gonna be like getting a new iPhone.
yeah. I mean, that's something that they were talking about back in 2012, 2013. Like, oh, you know, generations. We don't want to talk about generations, right? And if you look at how Microsoft has released their products, essentially they released half. Well, both Sony and Microsoft received a half console. So we're technically in the new generation. It's just that it was a half step, because the Xbox S was supposed to be the most powerful console, but was not sold as a distinct console from the Xbox One X, sort of. And the PS4 had the improved PS4. So I think both companies are angling for that, but clearly I think Microsoft is just like, this is our box is going to be a gateway to our existing services, which has always been something that all the way back to Xbox Live originally they have excelled with. So
Yeah, and then they've been making pretty good strides too in terms of backwards compatibility, and that's something I could definitely stand behind, especially since they have been pushing that is, hey, we're making our current consoles, compatible with everything all the way back to the Xbox original.
talking about consoles and talking about the competition, we have the following news that essentially there seems to be a bug in Anthem, in BioWare/EA's Anthem game, that is breaking and crashing PlayStation 4s. So if Anthem needed any more good news, a la Fallout 76, well, they're doing fine, I guess.
I would still say that Anthem, for its disastrous launch, it's probably I would still say it's had I guess less controversial release than Fallout 76, even though I've heard that at least Fallout 76 is a little more funner than. Oh, your camera's all
Blur.
out of focus.
Okay.
But like, oh, there we go. but yeah, it's just yet another thing that Anthem can do right. So it seems that and playing Anthem on the PlayStation 4, I assume long term, since this wasn't reported when the demo was released, it seems like the console has kind of struggles playing the game, and then it will just suddenly either crash really hard in terms of the software, or completely crash the console, like the plug, like someone just cut the power to the console. And in some cases it just completely causes the console to not boot up at all. And I was just looking right before we started, it seems there might be there's a possible fix to that if you're fortunate, and that's if you could get the console to boot up in safe mode and get it to rebuild the database, then your console could be okay. But it seems that it's corrupting the file management. People have been speculating that it has something to do with if you turn the console off, or you kind of power it down while you have the Anthem running as an application, that's causing issues. So you have to try to close the application down first before you turn off the console. But this kind of goes back to my just the idea that I don't think BioWare can work with the Frostbite engine. I really think that this is ever since BioWare has had like an has been kind of forced to use the Frostbite engine. It's been nothing but trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Like the first game they released was Inquisition. Complete. They pretty much, I think, believe they spent most of the time developing during the development of Inquisition, just trying to overhaul this engine that's made for first person shooters for an RPG,
Mm-hmm.
and trying to build like large worlds and trying to get it to do what they needed to do. And even then, it doesn't run all that great.
Yeah.
I'm replaying Anthem right now, or Anthem Inquisition right now, and it hasn't aged well. It's some of it looks pretty, but it's still clunky. It still has like weird technical glitches to it. It's overall not that great. We kind of saw some similar issues with Andromeda, and that entire game had its own development woes, especially with like it seemed like they pretty much scrapped 3 years worth of work, a pre-production work on that game, and started from scratch 2 years before it launched. And I can't imagine that having to try to work with that engine again did them any favors.
Yeah, one thing I did notice both on Andromeda and Inquisition is that they were usually loading bugs. Like in Inquisition, and I'm playing on PC, and I don't have a particular fast hard drive, but usually when you go console to PC games, especially the older console games, they load very quickly compared to consoles because, your computer's faster and your hard drive is faster, right? It's not the slower, cheaper hard drives that are found in consoles. But Inquisition just takes forever. Sometimes it loads very quickly, sometimes it loads slowly. I also noticed the fact that, for example, if you save the game, like if you left the game at the starting position in Skyhold, it would take a while for the world to form up. Like literally, you were seeing the things popping in, and your character was in the air, and then lands. And why am I mentioning that? Because when you go to Andromeda, many of the crashes I had were in loading screens. Like, oh, you're gonna go here. Nope. We crashed to desktop. I was like, okay, right. And it happened during my playthrough last year. Enough times that I noticed it wasn't the off crash. I was like, yeah, this is still a bit buggy. And textures sometimes not loading very well, right? Especially in faces. Like transitioning from action to cutscene and backing in, especially in cutscenes. Sometimes the especially in the older version, like the Xbox 360, we actually had a version of Dragon Age Inquisition. Sometimes even the horrible textures there would look even worse because they wouldn't properly load.
Yeah.
So it's like, I think it's a thing of the engine, right? That they've been trying to make it. And
yeah,
so
and I'm replaying it on the PlayStation 4 Pro, and it still does not look all that great. When I kind of caught some footage with a PC version, it looked a lot better than the PlayStation 4 version. But even then, the load times for, if I remember correctly, for my experience, the load times on the PC version they were very inconsistent. And this was playing on a really good rig with on an SSD drive. Sometimes it would load really fast, and then sometimes it seems it would take a lot longer than it had previously to load the same map. It's just so unstable and poorly optimized. And I'm thinking this is what's wrong with Anthem, is that they probably spent, again, I'm wondering if like every studio, like it's like you would think that having worked with Frostbite and Dragon Age Inquisition, it's like, okay, so now you've had your growing pains. There you go. You already know, you got your engine and stuff, and you've learned how to kind of work with whatever quirks this software has. But it seems like no, they haven't. Even after all these years, they still haven't.
Well, what tends to happen, and this happened a lot in the Xbox OC era, was that we saw new engines or have engines, modified have engine. The Havoc engine was a modification of another engine, right? if the studio is much is the studio allowed to actually modify? Are they modifying the engine to fit their needs, or are they making the games around the limitations of Frostbite? Because if they're allowed to modify the engine, then eventually these, you would find workarounds and you literally build them into your new version of the engine, right? Eventually it will turn into something else. You can still call it Frostbite, like Frostbite 2.7 or 3.9, whatever. But if they're not, for whatever reason, not allowed to go into the basics of this and really work them around, then, no matter the game. And, well, Anthem is a third-person looter shooter as opposed to a first-person looter shooter, if I'm not mistaken. So that could be a problem, right? This is strictly a FPS engine that expects, for example, to render things in the first-person perspective, and just the sizing issues. Like again, example for one of the games when they switch engines, Mass Effect, the original Mass Effect, everything looked smaller. If you go back to that game, the camera was a bit farther and everything looked smaller, and the reason for that was the Mako. Everything looks more or less rightly sized for the Mako, but when you're on foot, it doesn't properly size up in some situations. Some maps, especially when you open area maps, in some locations, like beds look too small, items look too small, everything looks too small, because trying to keep the aspect ratio between one aspect of it and the other one was something that they had problems with. So yeah, and they switch engines eventually. They switch engines from Mass Effect 2. So there's that. And this is from a company that was known for creating engines back in the day. So there's that. Let's talk about before we continue with other game in the news. Dragon Age Total War mods add Blights, Grey Wardens, and Naughty Mages. Apparently, there's another Medieval 2 total conversion, this time around Dragon Age. Which I like the idea of. I like these total conversion mods. I haven't played a lot of games with them. A lot of RTSs and X4 games have them. I should try more of them, but I find them very intriguing. Right? It's like, oh, all of a sudden there are dragons here and mages and stuff like that. It's like, yeah, that really gives the game replayability in a way that a normal RTS wouldn't, because you get tired of the same units and the same locations and the same maps and the same abilities and the same look. So just to throw something out there. Now to some other not so good news. The first one is that the Dead or Alive, this is not really new in the industry and certainly not new to this particular company, but it's more like a here we go again. Dead or Alive 6 has a $93 season pass.
Yeah, that news.
And you say, oh, what's the problem with that? Well, the problem is that, first of all, the base game is supposed to cost about $60. It's a AAA game. And second, this is a fighting game, and most of the fighting games, the stuff they get extra, it's really like just characters and stuff like that. They don't... Fighting games, especially Dead or Alive, which is, from the very beginning, was really all about mostly seeing girls in very small clothes beat the crap out of each other. It was a pretty good game. I used to play it in the Xbox back in the day with my friends. But yeah, it's never been very sophisticated game. And then it really got a volleyball beach version, which was seeing the same girl models and even skimpier clothes, which is what you like. Go, more power to you. I don't mind them myself. But a $93 season pass? What are they going to give me for $100?
So apparently it's a bunch of costumes that you can buy for much more expensively individually. So they're kind of nickeling and diming you that way. And I believe there's a fan favorite character that's locked away in DLC, which you will get that with the season pass. And of course, this is labeled as season pass number 1. So that implies that they plan on releasing another season pass at some point that might be just as ludicrously priced as that one.
Yes, because...
But it seems to be mostly costumes.
Yeah, so this is just nickel and diming, strictly speaking. And talking about nickel and diming, we have Red Dead Online faces, according to Young Ya, some protests after they nerfed hunting, which was one of the things that activities that produced the most money. And technically speaking, the Red Dead Online is in beta. Again, this is not really new news because the same thing happened to GTA Online. In fact, I remember back in the day when GTA Online came out, they literally had to give wads of virtual cash to people to play the game because the economy was so nerfed that it's just
It was
people.
unplayable.
Yeah, people were not, people were grinding, or spending a real amount of money and not getting anywhere. And so, like, yeah, here's $1 million for you to spend in the game. And the thing about GTA Online is, the way I describe GTA Online is that it's the sandbox to the open world of GTA. Like GTA, the single player is really very linear, and it doesn't really have a lot of variety. Just go in, you do the missions. They're very, by road thing, very linear. You go from here to there, you do the thing, and there's some cool characters, some cool interactions. They try to be very cinematic. Take that for what you will, and there you go. But if you really want to play the sandbox, you really have to go online, and all the cool cars and planes and helicopters and yachts and ships, they cost money, right? The bases and all that. And unless you're achievement hunter, where they literally have a credit card, a corporate credit card to buy anything they want, and they often making the joke themselves that this car actually costs like $100 or $200 in real money. Yeah, you're not gonna get anywhere unless you're willing to spend that kind of money or spend godless amounts of time just playing the game. And of course, if you're playing a public server, open server with everybody, that means anybody can grief you. So you buy your new expensive little car, and then a rocket comes in and blows it to hell and back, and you're like, "Whoops, there it is," or somebody steals it from you. So, yeah, and apparently they're doing the same thing or similar things to Red Dead Redemption Online, which should surprise absolutely no one.
So my favorite line from that is that they essentially, I guess the thing that they pretty much nerfed was the hunting, how much money that you can get from hunting, and everyone was hunting because that's the best way to make money by hunting. Mm-hmm. So they changed that, so you don't make as much money now from skinning and selling your pelts. And their explanation is that, oh yeah, we never intended the hunting to reward you that much, which is like, so you're saying it wasn't a feature, it was a bug.
Mm-hmm. Well, the thing was that you kind of double dip because you got money for the skins and you got also money for the organs, the way they explained it. So people were quote unquote double dipping, but things are so expensive, and that was the only way to sort of grind the money.
So that's the issue. If people are having to try to exploit your system because everything else is not fun, then there's a problem with your balance in terms of gameplay and reward. I have kind of finding the similar issue with with Dragon Age Inquisition. I'm like, oh, I'm having much more fun exploiting the in-game mechanics to make gold and find stuff to sell quicker versus trying to just play the game legitimately, because your game is not all that fun. It's very grindy. And I believe Anthem had something similar too, that they ended up patching. They ended up releasing their patch, and then I guess rarer loot was dropping a lot more frequently than it was before, and then they kind of stealth patched that and back to normal again because they quote unquote didn't intend it to be that way. It's like, again, was it a feature or was it a bug? And apparently, and I kind of have a problem with that because it's like, well, we can always it's like, hey, the thing that people are enjoying right now that's kind of keeping them from buying microtransactions, let's just change that and say it was a bug.
And remember, kids, it's all cosmetic.
Yeah, it's all like, yeah, let's just let's just say we didn't intend it to be that way and change it. It's like, oh no, we never intended it to be that easy for you guys to earn money.
But it is important because it's all cosmetic. So, don't
Yeah.
complain because we're not really sending you power because of blah, 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 blah. But we have crafted a game that you have to significantly patch and fix because it doesn't work in a way that the inner economy will force you to pay us real money for the stuff that we're selling you virtually. Congratulations, you have been had. Here's a patch. Talking about being had and other things and bad news in the industry. Well, we already heard and talked about Activision Blizzard cutting 800 jobs, but then Activision themselves have admitted, and this is according to GameIndustry.biz, that 800 jobs could negatively impact our business. Remember when I said about short-term maneuvers that sometimes don't yield long-term results because we're all about the money, all about the Benjamins? Yeah, according to James Batchelor, I hope that's just his last name and not his condition, not his Facebook tag. Activision Blizzard has warned investors that plans to cut hundreds of jobs across its global business may damage the company. The published latest SE filing, spotted by PCGamer.biz, featured a new section in its risk factor relating to the plan to structure by trimming 8% of its staff. In this section, it warns that there's a myriad of factors that may affect whether these redundancies will achieve the saving Activision is hoping for. And even says that there can be no assurance that our business will be more effective or efficient or effective than it was before this new strategy. In other words, please don't sell our stock. We did this so in order so you will not sell our stock, you're still selling our stock. Why are you doing that? We're doing what you want us to do. That's my interpretation of this is like the Activision, the Boston Activision say, okay, what does the market like? The market loves when we quote unquote trim the fat. Okay, we're gonna fire 8% of the people, but that might affect our company. Oh, wait a minute, we're not seeing the rise of stock that we expected because people really don't have trust in us for other reasons, and we're gonna go one of those reasons right now. Maybe we won't fire 8% of people because that might affect us even more. So what we really want is for you to not keep selling our stocks off so that our value of the company doesn't go down, please. Maybe. Yeah.
So I kind of interpret that as like, hey, this is what we intended with that move, but it may not work out. Sort of like a preemptive excuse, like, oh yeah, in case like this doesn't end up making us money or saving us money or costing us money further down the road. That's why.
A publisher said that has to set aside, might have to set aside 150 million to compensate affected staff. Essentially, they're gonna have to set the equivalent of a Call of Duty worth of game set out. So that's a multi-billion-dollar company. It's not a lot, but also remember that the overall value of Activision stock has fallen by 50%. I like to explain to everybody that literally means that Activision is 50%. It's worth half of what it used to be before this drop. Like everything in the company is worth less because that's what the stocks represent, the value of the company. So yeah. And if they have to compensate the fact that maybe that a lot of those contracts may have, clauses that said, well, if you fire me for this or that, or, or may have to hire some other people or expand or contract offices or legal fees or who knows. Talking of legal fees, and this comes from comicbook.com, but they sometimes do very good news reporting on video games. Activision is being sued over losing control of Destiny. And Activision, we talked about before, is that Bungie and Activision called it splits. That happened last year. And to quote the article, a few shareholders were shocked by the seemingly sudden move and are suing the company over misleading information. Kuzniki Law PLC is the firm taking on the case on the behalf of the responding investors, particularly those who purchased shares from Activision between August the 2nd, 2018 to January 10th, 2019. So pretty much very recently. According to the filing, Activision did not reveal to the new investors that a split was being discussed, and given that Activision stock has taken a tremendous downturn in light of the split and a recent mass layoff, some shareholders are less than pleased. Law firm policy revealed the intent. So basically, You didn't tell us you were going to do this. We bought our stock on the
Yeah.
faith that it would make money because you had among other assets, Bungie and Destiny, which
Yeah.
made you a lot of money in the past and had over 25 million not subscribers, I suppose, but sold. By the way, Apex Legends busted that record. Although Apex Legend is free to play, by 50 million. In other words, twice as many people have at least installed and played a little bit of Apex Legend. Of course, it's free, so you don't have to spend anything extra, I suppose, besides electricity and internet connection, over Destiny. That's 50% more. That's 25 million more than Destiny, and that's the original Destiny at its height.
Yeah. And of course, just because there's people playing doesn't mean that they're
Buying.
I was gonna say, yeah, I was gonna say paying.
Yeah.
Turning that stupid adage of turning players into payers, but that just sounded terrible coming out of my mouth. But yeah, that's just because Apex Legends is getting that many players doesn't mean that they're actually buying any of the microtransactions or making anywhere near as much money as say like that any of the Destiny franchise stuff. The thing is, it's that I can sort of see the point, especially since the last major, I guess, shareholder meeting was that they were disappointed in the latest DLC, the Osiris DLC, and that they were planning on trying to essentially get more player in engagement. That they essentially sounded like they wanted to double down on the microtransactions. So, I mean that probably sounds very lucrative to investors.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So squeeze the game
Oh,
and get us more money. Sure, we're
yeah.
gonna stick with this.
And then surprise, yeah, we cut Bungie loose and stuff. So
And there was Inside Gaming did also an article, a video on this, and it seems that the reason, and we talked about this before, one of the reasons that Activision was able to get from under, I'm sorry, not Activision, Bungie was able to get from under Activision was because they got a huge investment from a Chinese investor company. And we're able to go, oh, we have money now. We don't need you anymore. We can self-publish. So, bye. And just like, oops, there it is. And so money, that probably also means that Bungie probably had to pay a fee. Probably a minimal fee, but a significant fee.
I assume.
So to get under from under that contract. So there's that. But certainly not enough to, assuage, the stockholders. Yeah, there's that. Talking about, and this I think will lead us to the discussion today. Riot Games hires a chief, it is according to The Verge, Riot Games hires a chief diversity officer to address toxic workplace culture. We've been talking about this for a couple of months now. Riot Games had a riot of a year when accusations of toxic work environment and an abusive manager. And let me quote you. League of Legends developed Riot Games hired chief diversity officer to help fix issues surrounding sexist and toxic workplace, swallowed by the in-depth Kotaku investigation last August. And I'm going to link to the investigation. I left the company really in the months since. Now, Angela Roseborough, if I'm pronouncing that right, I hope so, who's formerly the global diversity inclusion head at Dropbox, has been tasked with creating diversity programming at Riot. Riot confirmed they hired to The Verge, but did not immediately provide comments on Roseborough hiring. Statement Riot blog post, Roseborough said, "I can't wait to get started and do my part to make sure that we have a culture that embraces uniqueness and every rioter, wow, and a community where everyone feels a sense of belonging." Yeah, that's that. Yeah, that's like corporate speak that somehow seems a bit tone deaf, but well-meaning nonetheless. And I'll link to the Kotaku article so you guys can know what it is, so you know how I'm making this up. You can decide for yourselves, but I think the reason why this links into what we're going to talk today about the dreaded SJWs, who stand for social justice warriors, is the following. Well, let me paint you a picture. Probably all of you have seen. And in fact, I'm right now, if I just closed my Facebook window and I was seeing comments like that. Let's say that you have an article about a problem in a company or a problem with a video game. You put it on YouTube as a video, you put an article on Facebook or social media, and then you make the mistake, perhaps, unless you know it's a closed group, to look at the comments. And invariably, I think a lot of the comments would point to stuff that we're talking about, like, CEO malpractice, inflating things with microtransactions, rushing games to market incomplete, the patching culture, hypes that doesn't match what the game finally will deliver, a host of industry problems, overwork developers, the abusive relationship between publishers and developers, etc., 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 right? Stuff that there's oodles of data on and articles and, that's what we do every week. We talk about, it seems like we spend the last 3 or 4 months just talking about that on the news. Whether it's Riot, whether it's EA, whether it's Activision or someone else, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you have people who ignore all that and they go right to the fact, well, it's because they have like forced forced diversity, or it's the SJWs who want to ruin our games because I don't know, everything has to be gay or something, right? And I started thinking about that, and it's kind of easy to just dismiss, like, oh, these people are just stupid, and they're, whatever. Anybody who uses what's called Snar World, and I will link to Rational Wiki so we can understand what a Snar World is. That's SNARL, but it's under loaded language. What's up, Super Banana? How you doing? A Star World is a derogatory label that can be attached to something or even to people in order to dismiss their importance or worth without guilt. When using a Star World, these words are essentially meaningless. Most of them can be used with meaning, but that seldom happens. While not actually using the phrase, liberal comedian pundit U.S. Senator Al Franken went into the great deal about the vast right-wing conspiracy, use of Star Worlds and other forms of emotional appeal in his first political work, Rush Limbaugh is a Big Fat Idiot. And, I mean, the list of this includes, I think it does have, yes, social justice warrior. You can click on that. I'm gonna do you a solid, so you can, if you really go down that wiki hole. Let's look at that. Social justice warriors, which was my positive attribute to people who defended and advocated for change, and how marginalized groups are treated and now become a toxic shame word. Mostly those who are threatened by SJW advocacy use the term social justice warrior in a pejorative, snarly form. Right, to sort of these are just the people, right? It's coded language, right? It's and it's very easy to dismiss. It's like, oh, and it's like, there's tons of words which people use, and you're like, yeah, and I can tell you, either you're gonna immediately agree, right, because you agree with the sentiment of the word, or you're gonna go like, this person is an idiot or whatever. And it's across the political spectrum, across fandoms, across all the things, right? It's sort of that language.
I mean, I think some of this could probably be even considered like almost like a dog whistle too.
Yeah, it has aspects of that as well. The question is, to me, is why, and I think that's what we're gonna try to discuss. Why is it that in the face of evidence of what a lot of things are happening, the reaction of people is to go, oh no, it's not that. It's this completely other thing. It's the Anita Sarkeesians of the world that are ruining games. These things are bad because somebody said that maybe they should be, I don't know, that, oh, this game is bad because Tracer is a lesbian in Overwatch, right? And all the games have to have that now. You're like, or Apex Legends, which has in the roster a lot of characters. I think most of the main characters are non heterosexual, right? You're like, they don't even show it on screen, right?
I was gonna say, are they? I have no idea.
I think a couple of them are, according to Internet Blather. So I haven't even checked, but it's like they're not kissing in front of they're not even kissing or hugging hands.
You don't like Overwatch. You don't see Tracer slapping Widow's butt.
Yeah, or something like that. You don't see them going to corner and making a phone call to their significant or like, yeah, honey, I know that you don't. I know that yes, I know it's your birthday and and wine doesn't fit well with your stomach, but I just want to have a little drinky, just right? It does that doesn't happen in game, right? And people enjoy the game, but somehow the inclusion of these things is a problem. But more to the point, and I like to categorize this as sort of the black helicopter thinking, right? It's that sort of there's a situation and you're aware that the situation is bad, but when you go to the reasoning of trying to reason why it's bad, you go places that most everybody goes like, but there's no connection to that. You're blaming other people who have nothing to do with this.
I think it's like a defense mechanism. It's them trying to rationalize the thing that they like, or at least or a thing that they're thinking should be good, but it doesn't meet their standards. And they're trying to find something that like a reason why it doesn't meet their standards, whether it's rational or not. And I think they're trying to look for something that, I don't know, like say, I don't know, we'll take our whipping force out, like BioWare. It's like, well, previous BioWare games, like the gameplay mechanics are have been fantastic and stuff, and they previously made the games. Like, what could it be? No, it can't be. It can't be the game industry culture in terms of how games are developed, um, how the working conditions are, the entire publisher issue thing. It can't be that, because if that's bad, that means video games are bad. Therefore, I'm supporting a bad business with my money, which makes me bad.
Mm-hmm.
So it can't possibly be that. Oh, it must be because there's a lesbian character in the game, and I heard that they might have consulted with some SJW, some well-known SJW, to help write a character to make them accurate.
Yeah. And I'm gonna. Here's where I'm splitting the difference. Not because I'm going for the golden mean, but rather because there is something to it. But even a lot of this terminology sort of misses the mark, in that they're getting close to what's happening, but it's like we're getting close and then we go off the rails. And this is that, yes, there is an aspect of this that companies, being corporations and trying to make money, they do. And I'm not using individuals, corporations, because when it's an individual who does it, it's just hypocrisy. That there's a term for it, but virtual signaling, which is, I don't know why I reverse those words, in which you say, oh, EA wants to deflect from the fact that it's loading all these games with lousy DLC packages and microtransactions.
And they were voted like the worst company in America 2 years straight one time.
But this guy with the horns, he's tall and handsome and has the nipples out, and it doesn't matter who you are, you can pretend that you're virtually fucking him. Yeah, so there you go.
And he's completely accepting of everybody. He doesn't care, even though it completely contradicts the lore of his race and his culture.
Yeah, or that one character that we created that, well, unfortunately came out straight. We're going to change the entire game, so now it's you can also suck sexily romance, you boys, you naughty boys who want to get into the puddle with him. You can have that same sex scene. We're actually not going to show anything, and it's going to be exactly the same as the other romance. We're just changing the voice actors recording the same lines. But hey, don't look at the fact that our facial animations suck. Yeah. But going back to the point is, like, some people actually, for example, Andromeda, people were blaming the whole thing with the facial animations. Like, I view videos like, oh, all the women, all the characters in Andromeda look ugly because SJWs, right? Because SJWs want to make everybody ugly because nobody can be beautiful. And it's like, it could be that they were cheap and they used the same models for everything, which you just now notice because the models were not as good as the other models.
Yeah, I'd say I was once on a stream that was complaining. I'm like, first off, what's the problem with the female character looking ugly. Like, so what? Like, is that bad? Does she always have to look good? And they like say, oh, well, she looked good in like the previous things, and they seem to have like made her uglier. It's like there's difference between concept art and praxis. Like maybe she didn't translate very well. It's like
Or
I don't think they intentionally made her unattractive, and
yeah,
because they're all trying to like link me to like the picture of like her actual like face model, like because they're modeled after certain people, like actual models, and they're like, well, yeah, she doesn't look anything like her, but so what? And
yeah,
I know the biggest one that was controversial was that one. I want to say that he was like Middle Eastern of some sort. He was contracted by BioWare, and he has some very negative views, and especially with Caucasians when it comes to. I think he wanted to be like, oh, Caucasians, kill them all and stuff, and um, you
yeah. I
know,
think I remember a tweet like that, and he got fired because of it. Yeah.
no, he wasn't
Oh, he
fired,
wasn't, sir?
and no, he wasn't. Yeah, as far as anybody knows, he faced no disciplinary actions, which may not be true at all. And I mean, he was fired once his contract ended, so they didn't renew it, and he work with Andromeda was done, but they blamed him for a bunch of things. And it's like, oh, that's why there isn't I can't make my character as white as I want or something, or like as light and pasty skin. Oh, it must be because of him. It's like, really, you really think one person is gonna have that much pull?
Dynamo 113 brings a point. Self-education is crucial to the development of lore in game where saving the universe is the goal. So we're talking about the power fantasy. So let's talk about the power, for instance, shall we? Because here's the thing. It's okay to self-identify, but isn't that what everybody's clamoring for? Isn't that what the so-called SJWs are clamoring for? Like, oh, we also want to self-identify. I'm not saying that you're saying that that's not it, damn it. I'm just making the general arguments, not trying to put words in your text here. Everybody's clamoring for it. But the people that tend to complain about the so-called SJWs are complaining that their power fantasy gets ruined when other people's power fantasies are allowed or included.
Yeah, we especially we see a lot of things like, oh, how am I supposed to relate to like a gay protagonist? Or when Watch Dogs 2 came out, the protagonist is, I believe, African American descent of some sort, and everybody's like, how am I supposed to relate to him? I'm not black. It's like, but you expect, say, me, a Hispanic person, to relate to like the first character. I've never played either one of them, but I know that the first main protagonist was of Caucasian descent,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it's like, oh, you expect me to relate to him? Like, I have no problem relating to them. Or what about like every like really old school video game? We've always had these forced romances. It's like, why am I supposed to like relate to, say, this male protagonist that I'm playing, to just accept like this forced romance between like this female character that he just met like 5 hours ago, and now they're in love, and watch them make out and kiss and stuff, as me as a gay person? It's like, I'm supposed to relate to that, but you can't relate to, say, watching two men like develop a natural relationship over the course of time, and accepting each other, and maybe even having to struggle with the social fallout of that. You can't be expected to even just entertain the idea of that, to get this new perspective. Yeah, and I see.
Daniel has raised some points here. I'm going to read Daniel, your last one. That's like saying we need to change the main character of movies because it can't relate to the main character, because I can't relate to the main character because we can have different gender. The thing about it is that if you look at the history of Hollywood, for example, not so much video games perhaps, but Hollywood, where video games get a lot of inspiration, there's been tons and tons of movies where the gender, where the story, the sex, the gender, the color, the ethnicity of the character has been changed because they thought, hey, if this character is gay in the book or in the play, we can't have that because in the past there were essentially kind of rules against that, but more to the point and explicitly discriminatory because it was without game being evil and all that, which is bullshit. And also it's because it's not going to attract the audience, right? We're pitching for a specific audience. Nowadays, more games especially have most of the, if you think about what the quote unquote SJWs are saying, there's also the caricature as well, which is part of the Snar World thing, is more like, we're not saying you can't have your fantasy, right? It's like, we want to be inclusive. In other words, we want to be expanding the situation. You have 5 romanceable characters, at least one of those characters, 2 of those characters, 3 of those characters, half of them, whatever, can they help me express my part of the power fantasy of romancing someone I am attracted to, right? Also not talk about SJWs and realism, like the whole thing with Battlefield 4. Oh, women in the battlefield. It's like, yeah, have you heard of the Resistance? Haven't heard of all the women who were there? Have you heard about the Eastern Front and some of the best snipers and fighter pilots in the Soviet forces were women? Like, they were women fighter aces and sniper aces that killed dozens, hundreds of the enemy, right? Sometimes I think what's happening, and this is the old canard of, I'm complaining because it doesn't fit my expectations. And I am noticing this because it doesn't fit my expectation. When it fits my expectations, it becomes invisible, right? If I expect an all-white, all-male cast, and I get an all-white, all-male cast, I don't see a problem because that's exactly what I expected. The moment you put a woman in the cast, it's like, well, I didn't expect that. It's like putting a black elf. Like, oh, elves are not supposed to be black. Yeah, and unicorns are not supposed to fly. But what the fuck, right? But going back to the source of it, again, and going back to the industry, I think a lot of this stuff is misdirected anger. You mentioned yourself that people coming from the outside putting their quote-unquote paws in our games. I'm going to post it, and this was the first video I ever made in my YouTube channel. You can go to YouTube, Lessons Learned. This is the first video. It's like, about video games being or not being political. Video games are part of the media. They're part of the culture. They reflect the culture and expand and comment on it, whether they want to or not. So all things are political. Now, things could be overtly political, right? I could make a propaganda film to try to make a case for Soviet-style, authoritarian communism. That would be overtly political. Or I can make a war movie in which I hint at one side or the other is the good guys, even though when you look at the reality of the situation, the people who were not all sides were wholly good and all sides were wholly evil, and etc. etc. Things are more complex. It's art, and it's art's reflection of times that past, times that are current, and times that are to come. Yeah, and we could be critical of this, and if people from the outside criticize us, we can listen to it. Let me maybe give an example of something. I probably want to make a video of this because we don't have a lot of time. We're going to make another podcast about this. But one of the things I have with a problem that I have with, say, media critics who often in YouTube engage with video games, it isn't that they engage in the criticism of cultural tropes and representation and diversity as part of a much larger media landscape, right? My problem, and this is usually something that a lot of people who play video games don't seem to have a problem except as route, is that when they talk about the technicalities of video games, they do it from the point of view of a movie or a television show that really doesn't fit. But we really don't talk about that, right? And that's a problem because sometimes they use terms and ideas as like, dude, have you actually ever played a video game? Because that's not what's really happening, right? And the same thing happens with the problems with the industry. I think there's a lot of misdirected anger, right? And it's like, oh, yeah, it's all about, oh, I hate the fact that my games are essentially costing more and more every day, and I have to spend more and more to get more of the content because they're coming smaller, and the games are coming out that they are unfinished. But again, like Chapelmont, you said, I don't want to blame myself for having supported microtransactions and having defended them, and because they were choice and stuff like that. It must be, I don't know, it must be the aliens from Mars who landed in the coffee fields and they got into the bad batch of coffee, it's the Starbucks and said the Amazon comes, something like that, something like black helicopters and blah blah blah, right? It's like it really has nothing to do with the real problems that we're dealing with, but people are attracted to the idea. And the thing about it is important. It's not simply if it's just some comments in the YouTube section or a video, something like that, it's like, okay, fine again. But literally, there are people who are making, collectively, at least, millions of dollars, specifically in YouTube and other areas, making these misleading critiques. Right?
Yes. It's almost like hate mongering.
Yeah, it's like, oh yeah, and so you have angry players who are attract. They want a source to express their anger, and somebody's telling them, yes, it's exactly what you think. The aliens landed on the coffee field. Congratulations.
And like, I think back to like when Mass Effect 3 launched and everything controversial whatnot with Mass Effect 3. I know I saw like some people blaming what's her name, Jessica Chopop. Like, what? Why? Like, yeah, sure. Like, you can question everything around that decision of having a journalist from IGN and like included in the game and whatnot, and her poor acting skills and just the everything, all the judgment around that. IGN not putting a disclaimer on their Mass Effect 3 review. Oh yeah, one of our employees is in this game. You can say all that, but like she had no fault of that, and like attacking her, like why? Like why are you putting this poor woman through that? When especially she has no control over anything about this game other than her inclusion. Yeah. Which you can probably say she might have had bad judgment. Like, as a journalist, I probably shouldn't, but like any fan, like if you or I would like be invited, hey, would you like to get mocapped into the game and have like a small NPC role and voice acting? Like, would you really say no? Like, I'm not a very good voice actor. It's okay, we'll coach you. But would you say no?
Probably not. I will go like, sure. And I'll be sorely tempted, yeah.
And it's like, but it's and of course the big one is Anidia Sarkeesian. I have my own dislike of her. It's mostly having to do with like, I think she could have phased her arguments a lot better and made them more convincing and taking better, essentially making her content much better and much more palatable for a wider audience than how she created her content. But I agree with her message that in terms of women's representation in video games has always been pretty bad. But like this woman, regardless how you feel of her, she should not have to live in fear for her life. And that's just terrible. And that's what this fear mongering tends to lead to, is these people having to live in fear of her lives. Granted, you can also argue that she's probably made bank over that, which is another completely different issue. But it shouldn't have happened in the first place.
Allow me, Daniel, to take an issue with your first sentence of the last message you put in. You say, yeah, but changing for inclusiveness for the sake of inclusiveness is undermining to the actual goal, in my opinion. Here's the thing. Companies do not do things for the sake of itself. This is not art for art's sake. The people demanding the changes might claim, and probably in a way it is a claim, that we want diversity because, first of all, the idea of diversity has a value of its own, which is questionable. Look at the news about a diversity hire for Riot Games. That could work, or maybe not. Maybe it's just a matter of, again, virtual signaling and don't leave us alone. We hired somebody who knows about this. We're working on the issue. Just don't keep reporting on it, right? It could be that. Right. Yeah,
I mean that sometimes, and that's kind of that's understandable. Like, I personally hated like the inclusion of Steve and Samantha from in Mass Effect 3. I felt like that was virtuous signaling, mostly because they were poorly written. They feel like they were shoved in there just to tick literally a checkbox. And considering that like Shepard, a pre-established like homosexual or heterosexual male, it's like, oh, well, okay, just he rolls with it, like with no explanation, no exploration, no like, universe is ending. Hey, like, just if they had like a line with like, say, Caden saying, hey, I've always had feelings for you. I've just, I was kind of conflicted, and now the universe is ending, so why the hell not? Just have something like that, just some exploration. But yeah, I felt like that was just ticking a box, and I felt that was just virtual signaling and kind of corporate trying to be all like, hey, we're inclusive, wink. But
and
and
go
and
to
then
the go
like
ahead, yeah.
yeah, and then like there's the opposite with and Dragon Age Inquisition with like the NPC character Krem. Like Krem was really well written. It seems like they did their research. They did a lot of good things with that character, and that I didn't feel was virtual signaling, especially since it's not like it wasn't obvious to me. I might be naive. It wasn't when I first played until they kind of mentioned it. I'm like, oh, I guess you are. You do kind of sound effeminate. I thought you were just a young, like a young man whose voice hasn't dropped yet. I'm like, oh, you were born a woman and now you're you're living as a man. Oh, good for you.
Yeah.
It sometimes I think it's in terms of how good the writing is and how it's presented.
And we can discuss those things. Those things have nothing
Yeah.
to do. I mean, we're talking about whether or not it's good, gone, well done. You talk about Deminel talk about his personal experience. A lot of people don't talk about this on a one-on-one, right? If you meet somebody who's a gamer, the first things come out of their mind is like, why are there panty shots on this Japanese game? That's probably not the opening line you're going to do then. But I have been in a lot of spaces, especially in the internet, where it is discussed, right? It just happens that part of the reason it doesn't get discussed as widely is because of the accusation of it, oh, you're ruining the game, right? And that tends to shut down the conversation because it becomes confrontational.
Oh, you're not the target audience.
Yeah,
It's not for
this
you.
etc. And that goes on both sides, right? The whole thing with Shira, for example, it's like, well, it's for kids and not the target audience, and blah blah yada yada. You mentioned Apex characters, but we already had I mentioned earlier in news, and it wasn't explicit news, but Apex, whether what that was done to sell more copies, and we don't have any evidence. It doesn't sell copies because it's a free game, but right now have been announced that it has over 50 million downloads compared to 25 million for Destiny to do that. And sometimes, let me put it this way, you and I perhaps, I'm assuming a couple of things about you, damn it now. If I'm wrong, then go ahead and correct me. You and I, it's a fair point. So how are they gaining the demand from it? Well, basically they look at their own forums. They look at places like Tumblr. They get emails from people, right? Maybe their own staff as well, right? Maybe they have new hires and somebody raises their hand in the office and goes like, yeah, that's a cool concept, but what if this character, instead of being a white male, were a lesbian character? And someone else got, let's put let's put you in the office, right? Where there, and somebody else asked questions like, yeah, well, what's gonna do that for us? Well, see, because they have a girlfriend who is on this and this. It's like, well, we haven't done that before, right? And there's some companies who, whether or not there's a specific demand, they have built their brand, like BioWare, have built their brand on being inclusive. And let me tell you something. Look at what happened with the controversy of the latest Assassin's Creed, where they changed the thing where you have to have DLC, so you could play, essentially the characters could be, as you play them, bisexual or pansexual, which is not the same thing, by the way. But in the DLC, you have to go into a heterosexual relationship for the explicit purpose of having a child. Now, that's an explanation from lore, because this is literally supposed to be the first assassin, so, the bloodlines and the genetic code and all that. But the thing is, that wasn't hinted at all in the main game, right? That you had to do that, and then they included it in the DLC. So that's a sort of reverse. Like, you had a bisexual, a quote unquote diverse character, or character allows you for diversity of explanation other than the strict binary, forced into a situation which a lot of players found themselves uncomfortable with, and they griped about it. And guess what? Ubisoft now is changing it back again. I don't know exactly how they're going to change it. Maybe you adopt or something, and maybe you kiss the kid on the forehead and that's a DNA transfer. I don't know, right? Maybe there's a
alien technology,
alien
because I think
technology, yeah, it's all like that. And it's a clone or whatever, and then that clone has a kid the standard way because you don't have access to technology, right? It gets you to those points in which it's inevitable. And it's another thing I heard about. I heard about this, and I don't have the link to it right now. Is that about a couple of years ago there were um, a lot of developers, particularly, who were worried. Um,
hmm
yeah, and that's and that could be bad writing, right? That is the essence of bad writing, right? Um,
or
it's
sometimes a lot of things in the background, like writers leaving.
Yeah, and someone else comes in and is like, no, we're going to do this because this is what I like. Um, but one of the complaints that, and all the worries about, there was something that was circulating about 5 years ago or so on the internet, and some I don't have the specific sources right now, but there was a worry that essentially video games have tapped out their normal demographic of 15 to 30, right?
hmm
Mostly because people were getting older, so and new gamers were not coming, and there was 15 to 30, but primarily white males. So again, it's not simply for diversity's sake. It's like we need new markets, right? We need new people to come in, especially if we're expecting sales in the tens of millions and live services that we sustained for years. Maybe the old Call of Duty crowd or Doom crowd or Dragon Age basic crowd or something like that doesn't work. Or maybe they just look at the sales figures of something like the original Dragon Age, which had two characters who were bisexual, and they go like, well, that game sold well. Let's do the same thing, right? It's as
Let's
simple
make
as that.
every character bisexual in the
Make,
second.
yeah, make every character in the second game
Which
bisexual.
for the record, neither one of us particularly enjoyed
Yeah, it
that.
doesn't make any sense, right? You can make mistakes when you're doing this, right? But again, going back to the original concept is that those things, you can analyze those things as being problems of an individual game. They're not necessarily a problem in the industry, and I don't see any of them really generating the anger or being the source of the real problems with the industry, right? Like, oh, having this character introduced this way, for example, having all the characters bisexual without is bad writing, but doesn't affect all the real problems that Dragon Age 2 has, or I have with the game. Right? That's just one another you can tick in the box. Like, and on top of this, like the repetitive engagements, the limited mission types, the mess of stories, the fact that the main character is basically a do nothing right? That at the end of it doesn't really matter. You feel like you played this game and nothing happened, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
and I think I sort of understand what the animal is saying. It's like, so I think what he's trying to say is like, how do you know the difference between what's genuinely diverse, like author intent, and not just what's diverse for diversity's sake? Because I would have to agree that I personally don't enjoy just like having, when it's obvious that some, like we just change some characters around, like let's make this character a black woman, but like her background and her actions and nothing about her seems like she grew up as a black woman in America. She might as well just be a white male
Yeah,
that grew up in
that's the
America.
whole done right thing, and
Yeah.
and that
And
again allows for you have to go into the text, you have to go into the game, and you have to go into stories or the movie and really hammer it. And again, having this sort of thing about SJWs kind of prevents us from doing that
yeah,
because
because
any analysis of it is like, oh, but you're highlighting things that I dislike and make me uncomfortable. Don't do
exactly.
that. And it's like,
And
so blaming
yeah,
it. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, and I would recommend H Bomber Guy's most recent video, which was Awoken Brands, kind of touches upon this. Is when essentially corporations start kind of trying to be diverse, or at least seem like they're for a cause, and be like, hey, we support like LGBT stuff, and like, oh, toxic masculinity is a bad thing, like look at us, aren't we progressive, kind of thing. And this one, you kind of have to they kind of take advantage of those kind of cultural movements and cultural discussions, which you kind of have to be careful about.
Mm-hmm.
And just because they're they're saying something good doesn't mean that they're necessarily doing it for the right reasons.
Yeah.
And I highly recommend that video.
Yeah,
It's
it's pretty good.
entertaining
Yeah,
as
I
well.
saw it as well. War corporations. Yeah. So yeah, I think ultimately my assumption is that this sort of black helicopter thinking is that everybody's aware of the problems, but some people have decided that
It,
facing those problems head on is, for whatever reason, because of self identity, because of the way they behave, or they feel that when people criticize those games, they're criticizing them. Right? There's this. We
Mhm.
talk about the separation of the text versus the person, the object and the person, and so they fire back with, "You're trying to change my games." Uh,
Uh,
well,
Actually, I was going to bring that up as like, so like, what would be a good way to kind of try to get people to be, oh, it's hard to, I want to say less hateful and less isolationist.
I think sometimes is depending on the situation, you can get to someone saying, "Okay, what is your real complaint? Walk me through your complaint." Right? Because people just assume things like, again, the black helicopters. Like, okay, walk me through this, and some people will go into great detail about, I have these grainy pictures about these black helicopters, right, or these things, and they're just gonna go down the conspiracy route, and these people are lost. But some of the people is like, oh, but I heard about this. It's like, okay, what exactly do you hear? Okay, you watch this and this, she said this. Does that sound good, bad, indifferent? Some people you can walk through and go like, oh, maybe just racing a. But the thing is, it requires an ability to teach, which I don't have myself, and a lot of patience. But you can find people like, listen, the truth is, well, first of all, admit that yes, you're angry, and you have a reason to be angry, and then start sort of asking questions. Why are you angry? Oh, I'm angry because they included this kind of thing and that. How did that affect your experience? Well, people talk about realism. Well, did you know, for example, the realism? And, this is what happened here. But it has to be, I think part of this is also the tone, because part of this is also the cultural wars, right? The us versus them, right? And it's using terms like this is very easy to identify the them, the outsider, the attacker. And it's the same difficulties you have breaking through that. But sometimes you can take individuals and go, listen, I'm going to try to engage with you. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. And based on your answers, I can see where I can proceed. And if they seem to be open to it, and you have to be careful because some people are just trolls, right? That they think they're, they're following your argument, but really they're just, spinning you around, asking the same questions over and over again. But you can. And sometimes it's a matter of just being not, sounds kind of, weak, but sometimes it's not answering anger with anger. Not that you're gonna just, fold over and go like, oh, you might have a point. It's like, no, okay, listen. Being calm in the face of this apparent anger and asking some solid questions, you may find that at least on the individual level, you can get people to sort of change their minds. The also is we have to keep highlighting the actual facts about why things are going wrong, because what tends to happen is that when things keep getting going wrong, and that one game they love has nothing to do with, they haven't make any, there's no excuse for the SJWs because they haven't changed the clothing of the girls so that it's less skimpy, or they included a gay character who maybe just very over the top gay character who kisses at the screen or something like that, right? They haven't done something that's clearly out of bounds for them to fit into these categories, but the game is still crappy and they still feel bad about it. It's like, listen, here's the evidence. There might be another reason why this is. I'm not saying that your reasons are necessarily bad. I'm saying that there might be another reason. And once they start accepting that there might be other facts in the conversation, there you can again start cracking this. But it also requires making demands of them. And I think the media right now, especially in video games, are doing a better job. Ironically enough, the attacks on the media have worked in unintended consequences, and we see more and more media coverage about layoffs and poor working conditions, and we're seeing talk about unionization and stuff like that. And when the narrative changes and you focus on the real problems, you won't change everybody's minds, but And also don't promote people that, you don't have to cancel people, but you don't have to promote them either. You don't have to click on that video that says, SJWs are ruining my games, like you probably did when I put the title to this podcast, and you listen to it's like, yeah, be on the lookout, right? It's like somebody says, yeah, this video is recommended by this person. Yeah, well, don't try to say, don't watch this. Like, well, I don't watch it because of this, right? And maybe you get into that conversation. So it's a matter of sort of taking individuals and isolating them, and also focusing on the actual facts and reporting more of them. Because behind that one person that says the SJW, there will be 2, 3, 4, 5 people who say, yeah, but, or ultimately say, yeah, that has nothing to do with it. At least in this particular case, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we need that conversation, which terms like SJW, as they use as narwhals, ultimately shut down. And we cannot be allowed to be shut down. Either if you agree or not with the ultimate statements, any of the side.
And I think that another good thing too is, since this is a media, is to try to promote good media that, and this is a little difficult, it's that has good and genuine diversity, but a lot of the issue too is it has to be good gameplay, and of course it has to be the right genre as well that would appeal to certain people that share like negative views for this, and that can be a little more tough because I play a lot of dating sims, and I see good representation, I see some bad representation, but that'd be kind of difficult to try to get like somebody who say maybe had difficulty, or someone who had a lot of issues with, like, say, the Battlefield 2 diversity quota that seemed poorly implemented in that game, to be like, oh, those SJWs, this game sucks because of the SJWs in there. It's like, no, like, look, there's other good games that have similar things that were done better. But of course, it'd be probably difficult to get someone who's complaining about a first-person shooter to play a dating sim, and maybe it's like finding a good, like, well, here's a good example of a game that has certain these elements, and it's fine and it's successful.
I think ultimately it's you can go with the okay, there's more argument. Because the thing is sort of getting over the hurdles. Like, okay, I'm not going to dismiss you. I'm listening to you, but have you considered this as well? Right.
Yes.
But that takes time. That takes an enormous amount of patience,
and a lot of building bridges too.
Building bridges, and not everybody's good at it, right?
And unfortunately, some people aren't just not open to it as well.
And I think finally, and this is the general thing of fandom, you have to, as an individual, for yourself, remember that there's a space, there's a connection, but there's a space between the object and the subject, i.e., the object, the video game, the movie, what we usually call the text, and the subject, which is you, the person who watches and plays it. Because ultimately, non-binary says, before anything else, definitely takes me out of wanting to immerse myself, because I already feel the development by crafting a lore for political purposes rather than for the sake of building this world. I mean, that's ultimately your choice, right? If you feel that this is a non-starter for you, I mean, what can I tell you to convince you to play Apex Legends, right?
Yeah, and especially since I couldn't speak for the game, since I've never played any of the Titanfall 2 things. Maybe that was a thing before. It's like subtext, or it might have been in the background before. I couldn't tell you.
And I think that's the thing. Is like, again, it's also the conversation of how does it affect your immersion, right? You are feeling, according to what you're saying, that this seems to be an outside thing, an imposed thing. Maybe I'm going to say this. Maybe, and this is the counter argument that's made, is that by not having these people, the message is that they don't exist. And in many ways, to me, and I probably a couple of years ago, I felt more like you do, like it's people impose, but more now I changed my mind. It's like, because you can evolve in your thinking, and I'm saying that you're going to automatically do so because I'm saying this to you, or to anyone in chat. It's more to the point of, these people exist, both in the real life and it should exist in our virtual worlds, right? Um, does it? I mean, when you're playing, I think of it this way: it's there's that, but more argument that I'm making it for you, I guess. You're sitting in front of your computer, you're playing the hero. Uh, I think intended when I always feel less connected when someone's putting their soul into something. Maybe the designers wanted to actually put that in there. But let's say that you're playing the game and you're playing your main, right? And then you read a piece of lore that they have a boyfriend or girlfriend, or they had a relationship with someone, the gender, whatever. Let me ask you: does the character play differently for you? Does the mechanics of the game, the healing abilities, the secondary powers, the ability to jump or traverse the world, the shooting mechanics, the accuracy of it, the number of microtransactions, the length of the problems with loading screens, the ability of the game to crash or stability of the game when it has too many players, the ability for you to cooperate with the other in case of Apex, which is a team hero game as well as a battle royale. Does that affect it? Right? Sometimes because, and this is where it gets tricky because we're talking about personal predictions,
Yeah.
right? We're talking about your personal predictions, my personal predictions, Chapelmon's personal predictions, and I don't want to speak for you.
Yeah. And I could understand too, like my example with like Mass Effect 3. It's like it'd be one thing if like you just have a casual conversation and be like, oh, they mentioned they might like guys or had a husband, but like with my thing with Steve is like, oh my god, my husband, and oh, I can't get over my husband. Did I mention I'm gay? It felt with a lot of those characters like, hi, I'm Steve Cortez. I'm a homosexual. It's like, no, don't do that.
And you could see, for example, going wrong in Andromeda, they have a trans character, and one thing that trans people would say is that please don't detonate me, which is use a name that they no longer use because they have come in full into their identity, not their new identity, but what they feel is their truer identity. Well, this character names themselves, right? And that feels like someone who wasn't trans writing a trans character. Maybe they intended well. They wanted the inclusion. They wanted to show that trans people exist in the Mass Effect universe, because why they wouldn't exist, right? Especially with modern technology in that era, you have faster than light travel. So why can't people just have a sexual realignment, right? I mean, but the fact that she does it, it feels like this wasn't written by a trans person or somebody who actually talked to a trans person enough to say you shouldn't do that, right? Mistakes will be made, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it could be diminished, right? It could be diminished. It could be a selling point. But I think going back to my original point is the misdirection, right? The real problem with this game is this, which has nothing really to do with either the individual game as a sort of a real problem. All the problems, if you feel it's a problem, it's a real problem to you. But rather, it's a game breaking. This game was badly designed. It's completely unplayable. Nobody should play this game, and everybody should hate this game and not buy it because of this. Versus, I personally believe that there's something off with this, and I cringe at this point. And clearly, this is bad writing, right? There's criticism, and then there's sort of, this, I'm going to take a virtual flamethrower to this game because of something that doesn't really encapsulates the problems with the game, at least not completely. And also talking about that for the entire industry when there's a lot of evidence of a lot of stuff that has nothing to do with that, right? So be aware that companies are not your friends, and they're not doing this because they want to, at least many companies, want to do this because they want your money, right? They want to get as many people as possible, right? And if they have to sacrifice a couple of people to get someone else, they'll do it, right? They were doing it before. It just happens that there's a different group of people who were sacrificed. And to put it that way, right? When they were marketing for 15 to 30-year-old white males, they were saying games are for boys and no one else. And so if you were a girl and playing a game, there's something wrong with you because you were playing something for the boys, right? And that is not aligned with the views. I just think links of narrative needs to occur because it gets at the hand narrative microtransactions should have happened years ago. That's true enough, right? That being diverse is not being exclusionary in another way. Not really. People might feel that they're being excluded, but if for example, Apex Legends said there are no straight people in the Apex Legends universe, I would go like, okay, why is that? Oh, because they don't exist. Well, I might still play it, but I'm going like that's something. That's a big statement right there, right? I mean, everybody's a clone or something. How does this work? People donate their, do people go into special rooms just to have sex, but they never speak of it ever again? And it's a shame in this universe that you have, heterosexuals have maybe heterosexual feelings. Is that the message in this game? Right? Because if you're doing that, we're gonna have to sit down and talk about it. It's gonna something at least we're gonna have to talk about it, right? But that's not really what's happening for most of the time, right? And yes, people like Nito Sarkeesian can make mistakes, and when they make mistakes, you call them out on it, because I think people should, when they make mistakes. But again, the real issue is that all these narratives really are more of, I see the real problems here, but I do not. I acknowledge there's some problems, but my diagnosis of the problem is wrong, because that would admit at some level that I am wrong, or I feel that I'm wrong. Makes me feel like I'm wrong, and I don't want to feel that way. Ergo, I'm going to blame someone else. And like I said, that's going to take a lot of work. So we've gone about half an hour over our. I'm sorry to call it. Chat it down here, Dynamo. Thank you for all your thoughts. Thank you, everybody on chat, for joining us. I know this is a very controversial issue. I don't call myself an expert, never have, but we're adding our 4 cents, I suppose, with some change from the audience. Chapelmon, where can we find you on the interwebs?
You can find me as Chapelmon pretty much everywhere. I am Chapelmon_Aragon on Twitch and Twitter, but I'm primarily on YouTube as just Chapelmon.
And you're streaming Thursdays whenever you can, Dragon Age Inquisition on YouTube.
I tend to try to stream. I've been trying to kind of keep a sort of schedule. I've been streaming Dragon Age Inquisition now, like Thursday mornings, just to see if I can keep a regular schedule.
Yeah, I'm also a regular streamer. I just finished Dragon Age Dogma Arisen. Oh, no. So can you type Chapelmon in the chat so I can find it? Desktop. He has a privilege, so he can do that. Yes. And you can find me here. I'm a variety streamer, mostly strategy games and RPGs. I don't know what I'm going to play tomorrow, because I'm still iffy. I'm probably going to try Apex Legends. I think that's one of the games I'm really raring to try, but there's something about it. I can't just get my grasp about it. But I just finished Dragon Age Dogma. Later this month, I will be playing Sekiro Shadows Strike Twice. I may even go back to Dark Souls and play it, because maybe get myself repped up to Sekiro Shadows Strike Twice. I'm not really sure, but we'll see. Well, and if you would like to support this channel, there are many ways to do so. Of course, you can join the chat, as Dynamo113 did. You can also go in the Discord, which I'll put the link right here. Discord. That's a Discord link, and can also thank you, not lesson learned bot, and you can also sub and follow and subscribe and all those wonderful things. They're always welcome. So thank you, everybody, for coming, and as always, we'll see you when we see you. Bye bye, everybody.
Bye.